So Johnny and the professor are going to go out to Penobscot Bay, which if you want to know more about that, you can look at my video of the book Time of Wonder. They're going to Vinyl Haven Island, and Johnny has decided to tell Fergie about it. Also, significantly, Johnny is taking the skull on the trip with him. And we're going to go out to Vinyl Haven this Friday to see what we can find out, said Johnny, finishing up. He stared stubbornly and defiantly at Fergie. Well, here's your big, wonderful explanation, he added. And if you think it's all so funny, you can stay home and wait to see if we bring the professor back with us, okay? Fergie met Johnny's gaze. I didn't think the whole thing was funny, he said with a straight face. Just the part about leaving notes under statues in churches in the middle of the night. I think that's a riot. Johnny was getting more irritated by the minute. All right, so it's a big fat laugh, he snapped angrily. I knew you'd make fun of the whole thing. That's why I never told you in the first place. You don't think we have a chance, do you? Fergie shrugged. I don't know. Maybe you do and maybe you don't, but all the same, I'd like to go along. Johnny's mouth dropped open. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Was Fergie kidding? You want to what? I said I want to go along, replied Fergie calmly. Why, to make fun of us? Fergie shook his head. No, I like trips and I like going places with you. It'll be fun, like it was out at scout camp. Come on, let me go along. I promise I won't make fun of you guys. Cross my heart and hope to die. Johnny was flabbergasted and confused as well. He really didn't know what to say. He was infuriated by Fergie's nervousness and by his strange, confusing attitude toward the trip. But he really did want Fergie to go along. He enjoyed his company most of the time. And he had a hunch that he and Father Higgins might need an extra pair of hands. Fergie was a strong, sinewy, rugged kid. He looked gangly and awkward, but he could beat you at baseball or football or tug-of-war, and he could outrun a lot of the kids that Johnny knew. Johnny had no idea what they would be getting into out among those islands. They could use someone who could row a boat or climb cliffs or walk for hours without getting tired. While Johnny mulled things over in his mind, he sat absolutely silent, staring at a point on the wall above Fergie's head. Fergie's eager grin quickly faded to a hurt frown. He wondered if maybe Johnny was thinking up some nice way of telling him to get lost. If you don't want me to come along, just say so, muttered Fergie. He stabbed at the ice cream with his spoon and shoveled some into his mouth. Huh? Johnny was jolted out of his trance, and in a flash he realized what Fergie was thinking, and he was genuinely touched. Fergie would feel crushed if he was left out. He wanted to be included because he liked trips, but he also wanted to be included because he was Johnny's best friend. I was going to tell you could come, said Johnny hastily. It wasn't that. It was just that, well, Father Higgins is the one who was taking me. He's running the whole show. I was trying to figure out if maybe we could get him to take you, too. Fergie beamed, and Johnny felt glad. He really did want Fergie's company on this dangerous trip, but the question still remained. Could he persuade Father Higgins to include him? Oh, I think he'll take me along, said Fergie nonchalantly. He stared off into space and smiled secretively. I mean, if it's up to him, I'm in like Flynn. Johnny blinked. Why, Fergie, what the heck are you talking about? Fergie's grin got broader. Oh, didn't I tell you? I was the clean-up hitter on Father Higgins' city softball team 2 years ago. That was before I knew you. Higgy coaches kids' teams every summer. Well, that was the year that I broke up a no-hitter that some creep was throwing. I got a triple in the 9th inning, and Beaky Phelps brought me in with a single, and we won the game. Didn't I ever tell you about any of that? Me and Higgy are old buddies from way back. After Johnny had gotten over the shock of discovering that Fergie knew Father Higgins, he realized that this was going to be a much better trip than he had thought. Having 2 reliable friends along was a lot better than just having one. So Fergie and Johnny talked some more and tried to make plans. And then Johnny went home and called up Father Higgins. He knew right away from the way Father Higgins reacted that Fergie hadn't been kidding. The priest knew him and thought he was a real character. In short, he liked him, and he'd be glad to take him along. First, though, he'd have to get the Fergusons' permission, and that would take a quick phone call and some sweet talking. So Johnny hung up and paced around the living room. Finally, Father Higgins called back and said that Mrs. Ferguson had given them the go-ahead, Everything was set now. The three of them would be leaving on their journey around 3 p.m. on Friday. Father Higgins had been on a vacation trip to the Maine Islands last year, and he figured it would take them about 3.5 hours of driving to get to Rockland, where they would catch a ferry boat that would take them to Vinyl Haven. The last ferry left at 7:32, so they would have an hour's leeway in case they got delayed. Since the ferry boat ride would take about an hour and a half, the three of them would arrive at the door of the Lobster Pot Inn on Vinyl Haven at a little after 9. It was a cloudy afternoon on Friday when Father Higgins' black Oldsmobile pulled up in front of the Dixon house on Fillmore Street. The horn beeped loudly, but there was really no need for this. Johnny was out on the front porch waiting, his suitcase in his hand. Grandma and Grandpa were with him. As Johnny watched, Father Higgins got out of the car, slammed the door, and waved at the three of them. He was wearing an open-necked plaid cotton shirt, baggy army fatigue trousers, combat boots, and an old army fatigue jacket. Stitched to the right shoulder of the jacket were a white cross and a curved patch that said chaplain above it. Johnny had never seen Father Higgins in his old sloppy weekend clothes before, but it was reassuring somehow. It made him seem more human and less stern and priestly and forbidding. "Hi there, John," Father Higgins boomed as he walked toward them, waving cheerfully. "Are you ready for a voyage to the stern and rock-bound coast of Maine and beyond?" Johnny said yes, but his voice was weak and uncertain. Father Higgins was making it sound as if they were going to the moon. Also, he kept remembering the real purpose of the trip. In his stomach was a tight knot of fear. Father Higgins saw how pale and tense Johnny looked, and he tried to cheer him up. "Oh, come on, John," he said loudly, and he took Johnny's suitcase from him. "You look like you were going to have your appendix out. This trip is going to be a lot of fun." Johnny tried to smile reassuringly. "It's okay, Father," he said. I always get nervous before I go on trips." The priest smiled grimly, and in his eyes was a faraway look. "You do, eh? Well, you should try a trip while you're wading in a river with a lot of other soldiers in battle gear and helmets, while people on shore are firing mortar shells and machine gun bullets at you. Now there would be something to be nervous about." Again, Johnny was reminded that Father Higgins had been in some of the bloodiest battles of World War II. He had been fighting in the Philippine Islands. He hardly ever talked about what had happened to him there, but Johnny got the feeling that he had seen some pretty awful things. He also got the feeling that Father Higgins was a very courageous man. Johnny wanted to be courageous and bold, but he was having a tough time doing that right now. He told himself that this was a perfectly safe trip, that nothing bad could possibly happen to him. He was silly to be such a nervous nit. So Johnny gave his grandpa a hearty handshake, and he gave Grandma a big kiss and a hug. "Goodbye, John," said Grandpa. "Have a good time and bring us back a couple of shells off the beaches." "God love you, John," said Grandma as her grandson hugged her tight. "Don't forget to wear your sweater when you go out at night. You don't want to get strep throat or nothing like that." Johnny turned and waved twice as he went down the walk with Father Higgins. Then the priest opened the trunk and threw in the suitcase and slammed the lid. They both got into the car. The motor roared to life, and off they went. Their next stop was on Joy Street in Cranbrook, where Fergie lived. Father Higgins beeped his horn, and Fergie came racing out to the car to meet them, his suitcase in his hand. The outfit he was wearing was really something. He was all done up like a motorcycle thug. He had on skin-tight jeans and motorcycle boots and an amazing leather jacket that was all covered with spiky metal studs and colored glass reflectors. On the back was a picture of a big white skull with red glass reflectors for eyes. Over the skull were ragged white letters that spelled out Snake Eyes. Slam! That was the sound of Fergie's suitcase being pitched into the trunk of Father Higgins' car. "Hi-ho, Big John," said Fergie jauntily as he slid into the wide front seat and slammed the car door. "How goes it, eh?" Johnny said nothing. He was sitting stiff as a board, staring sightlessly at the window shield. All over his body he felt a ghastly, clammy, soul-numbing chill.